The air on Halcyon Station always tasted like recycled ozone and stale curry, a combination Jace Kellen had learned to ignore after 3 years of breathing it. He leaned against the graffiti-scarred bulkhead of the orbital ring's lower sector, his thumbs hooked into the belt of his security uniform. It was a cheap synthetic fabric that chafed against his neck, a far cry from the flight suits he used to wear, but it paid for the fuel cells that kept his ship from drifting into a decaying orbit. Jace was a man constructed of sharp angles and bad decisions. Being half-human gave him a slightly denser muscle structure and eyes that adjusted too quickly to the gloom of the neon-lit corridor, shifting from a muddy hazel to a reflective amber when the lights flickered. He watched the crowd surge past him, a river of frantic commerce composed of dock workers, desperate grifters, and tourists looking for illegal thrills. A bartender from the noodle shop across the way, a twi-human hybrid with blue-tinted hair named Kalia, caught his eye. Jace offered her a lopsided grin, the kind that usually signaled he was about to say something charmingly stupid. "You look like you are plotting a murder or a nap, Kellen," Kalia called out, wiping down a glass with a rag that was greasier than the floor. "I am multitasking," Jace replied, his voice a low rumble that cut through the noise of the maglev trains overhead. "I figure if I nap hard enough, the station might accidentally depressurize and kill everyone, which solves my boredom problem. 2 birds, 1 vacuum." Kalia rolled her eyes, though the corner of her mouth twitched. "You are morbid. Buy a drink or move along. You are scaring the customers." "I am the security," Jace said, pushing off the wall and strolling toward the bar. "Scaring the customers is literally in the job description. It is right there under must have a pulse and willingness to eat synthetic protein blocks." He was deflecting. Of course. He was always deflecting. If he stopped moving, or if he stopped making jokes that landed with a dull thud, the silence inside his head would get loud enough to drown him. He ordered a shot of the cheapest whiskey on the shelf, the kind that burned the memory of the day out of your throat. Above the bar, a massive holographic screen flickered to life, bathing the dingy establishment in a wash of solemn gold and white light. The chaotic noise of the market dampened instantly as the imperial seal rotated in 3 dimensions, followed by the somber face of a news anchor. "Tonight marks the 3rd anniversary of the tragedy that shook the empire." The anchor's voice boomed, smooth and artificially compassionate. "We pause to remember the noble sacrifice of Princess Lyra, lost to the void during a peace mission gone wrong in the Outer Rim." Jace's hand froze halfway to his glass. The breath hitched in his chest, a sharp, physical pain that he had to forcefully swallow. The screen shifted to a memorial image, high definition and heartbreakingly clear. Princess Lyra. She was breathtaking, even in a static image. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, pale and luminous, marked with swirling bioluminescent patterns that glowed a soft, pulsing violet. Her eyes were large, violet irises with no whites, holding a depth of wisdom that terrified most politicians. She looked regal, untouchable, and radiated an aura of quiet, unbreakable strength. "A martyr for peace," the anchor continued. "Though her body was never recovered, her spirit guides the empire still." Jace stared at the image, his amber eyes narrowing. The glass in his hand cracked, a spiderweb fracture running down the side, leaking amber liquid onto his fingers. He did not notice the cut. He knew that look in her eyes. He remembered how those bioluminescent markings flared brighter when she was amused, or how they dimmed to a dull gray when she was afraid. He remembered the way she smelled, like static electricity and night-blooming flowers. "Martyr," Jace whispered, the word tasting like bile. "Liar." The official story was a clean, tragic accident, a navigational error, a rogue asteroid field. But Jace knew the truth because he had been there. The memory hit him like a physical blow, dragging him away from the bar and back into the cockpit of a fighter jet 3 years ago. The flashback was never a gentle slide. It was a violent shove. Jace was strapped into the pilot's seat of his interceptor, the G-force crushing his chest as he banked hard through a debris field. The comms were screaming. Red warning lights bathed the cockpit in the color of blood. "Escort leader, pull back! That is a direct order!" The voice of Admiral Varric crackled in his ear, distorted by jamming frequencies. "Negative. Command," Jace shouted, his hands flying across the tactile controls. "The diplomatic shuttle is taking fire. Their shields are down. I can intercept." Through the canopy, he saw Lyra's white shuttle, a sleek bird of peace amidst a swarm of jagged black pirate corvettes. It was not a random pirate attack. The movements were too coordinated, the ambush too precise. They were herding her, not hunting her. "Lieutenant Kellen, you will disengage immediately." Varric's voice was ice-cold, devoid of the panic of battle. "Abandon the diplomatic asset. That is a priority 1 directive." "She is not an asset. She is a person," Jace roared, arming his torpedoes. "I have a lock. I can clear a path." He had her. He could save her. He could see the thermal bloom of the enemy engines. He squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. "System override authorized." The ship's computer droned in a monotone. "Weapons offline. Navigation locked. Autopilot engaged. Return to carrier." "No!" Jace slammed his fist against the console, shattering the display. "Override. Patch, give me control." "I am locked out, boss," his AI, Patch, replied, sounding unusually scared. "It is a command-level override. They have ghosted us." Jace could only watch, screaming silently behind the reinforced glass as his ship was forcibly turned away. He craned his neck, looking back one last time. He saw Lyra's shuttle, defenseless and alone, but it did not explode. Instead, the enemy ships deployed a strange, shimmering net of energy, a temporal rift generator. The space around the shuttle warped, twisting light into knots. The shuttle did not debris. It simply vanished, swallowed by a hole in reality that should not have existed. "Target lost," the computer stated, and then silence, the heavy, suffocating silence of a grave. "Hey, you are bleeding on my counter!" Kalia's voice snapped Jace back to the present. He blinked, the neon lights of Halcyon Station rushing back in. He looked down at his hand, where the whiskey glass had turned into shards. A thin line of blood trickled down his palm. "Sorry," Jace muttered. He dropped a handful of credit chips onto the bar, more than the drink was worth, and turned away. "Keep the change. Buy yourself a personality." He walked away before she could throw a bottle at his head. He needed air. Or at least the closest thing to it this rusted tin can of a station could provide. He headed for the tech markets in the lower levels, where the shadows were deep enough to hide in. The tech market was a claustrophobic maze of stalls built from scavenged hull plating and hanging wires. Vendors shouted in a dozen languages, selling everything from black market organs to hacked navigation cores. Steam vented from ruptured pipes, creating a dense fog that smelled of copper and frying circuitry. Jace kept his head down, his hood pulled up. He was looking for a specific stall that sold vintage thruster parts, a distraction for his hands. When a hand shot out from a dark alcove and grabbed his arm, Jace's training took over. In one fluid motion, he twisted the attacker's wrist and slammed them against the metal wall. His forearm pressed against their throat. "Easy, easy, Jace, it is me." Jace blinked, easing the pressure. The man beneath his arm was thin, shaking, his face gaunt and pale under the grime. It was Ree, an old comms specialist from his former squadron. Ree looked like he had not slept in a week. His eyes darted frantically left and right. "Ree!" Jace stepped back but kept his body angled for a fight. "I thought you were dead, or in rehab. Usually both." "I need you to take this," Ree whispered, shoving a small, warm data chip into Jace's hand. It was military grade, heavy and encrypted. "You are the only one crazy enough to look at it." "What is this?" Jace asked, turning the chip over. "If this is another one of your get-rich-quick schemes involving illegal betting algorithms, I am going to break your nose." "It is her! Jace!" Ree hissed, his voice trembling. "The princess!" Jace went still. The noise of the market faded. "Do not play with me, Ree. She is dead." "She is not dead." Ree grabbed Jace's lapels, his eyes wide and terrified. "They did not lose her. Jace, they traded her." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and radioactive. Traded. Before Jace could ask what that meant, a low hum vibrated through the floor. The crowd parted as 3 spherical drones drifted silently around the corner. They were featureless, matte black, with a single red optical sensor scanning faces, Imperial intelligence sweepers. "They are here," Ree whimpered. He shoved Jace back. "Run! Do not let them find it! Read the chip! Jace, read it!" Ree turned and bolted into the crowd, knocking over a display of cybernetic eyes. The drones swiveled instantly, their sensors locking onto his heat signature. They accelerated with a terrifying lack of sound, pursuing the panicked man deeper into the maze. Jace stood frozen for a second, the chip burning a hole in his palm. Then, he turned and walked casually in the opposite direction, blending into the flow of bodies, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He did not go back to his apartment. He went straight to the docking clamps on the outer ring. Sector 4. The Wayward Star sat in the hangar bay like a sleeping beast. It was an interceptor-class vessel, heavily modified and uglier than sin, patched together with scrap metal and hull plating from 3 different shipyards. It looked like a piece of junk, which was exactly how Jace liked it. It kept people from asking questions about the military-grade engines hidden under the hood. Jace keyed the airlock code and stepped into the familiar smell of hydraulic fluid and old leather. "A patch, lights," he commanded, sealing the hatch behind him. "Welcome home, oh fearless leader," a disembodied voice drawled from the overhead speakers. Patch, the ship's AI, had a personality matrix that was 70% sarcasm and 30% navigational data. "Did we get fired again? Or did you just offend someone important?" "Shut up and isolate the comms," Jace said, sliding into the pilot's chair. He pulled the data chip from his pocket and slotted it into the decryption drive. "Run a level 5 crack. Keep it off the local net." "Level 5? Patch's tone shifted, losing the humor. "That is treason-grade encryption. Jace, if we trip a tracer, the station security will vent our atmosphere just to save on paperwork." "Do it." Jace watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists on his knees. Traded. The screen flashed green. A folder opened, spilling out a chaotic mess of fragmented star charts. Bank transfer records with amounts that could buy entire planets, and audio files. Jace clicked on the first audio file. Static hissed, followed by voices he recognized instantly. "The asset is too volatile," a deep voice rumbled. "Admiral Varric, Jace would know that arrogant baritone anywhere. Her telepathic range is expanding, and if she takes the throne, she will uncover the black budget operations within a month. She cannot be allowed to ascend. Liquidation is messy, Another voice replied, smooth, synthetic. A member of the AI Council. It creates martyrs. We need her gone, not dead. Removed from the equation entirely. I have a buyer in the shroud, Varric said. Warlord Dorn. He collects rarities. He will pay in iridium and silence. We stage an accident. She disappears. The Empire mourns, and we proceed with the annexation of the Rim worlds. Jace felt sick. He felt a cold, hard rage solidifying in his gut like concrete. They had sold her. They had sold a living, breathing person, a princess they were sworn to protect, like she was a crate of surplus rifles. He clicked the next file. It was just labeled Lyra. I do not know if this is working. Her voice came through the speakers, soft and clear. It was a personal log, recorded maybe hours before the mission. They tell me to be a symbol, to stand there and glow and look beautiful. But I feel the people. Jace, I feel their fear. I do not want to be a caged ornament. I want to change this. I think I can. If I am brave enough. Hearing her name him sent a shockwave through his nervous system. I feel the people. Jace. She paused on the recording. I am scared. But when I look at your ship flying off my wing, I feel anchored. I hope you know that. Jace slammed his hand down on the console, stopping the playback. He could not listen to anymore. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing the air out of his lungs. He leaned back, closing his eyes, and the memory he had been suppressing for 3 years surfaced, unbidden and vivid. It was a week before the ambush. They were on a layover at a refueling depot. He had been in the hangar, running diagnostics on his thrusters. She had walked in, no guards, just her. She had stood next to him, watching him work. Then, without asking, she had reached out with her mind. It wasn't an invasion, it was an invitation. Flashback. The hangar disappeared. The world was just the two of them. He felt her mind touch his, cool, like water, but with an undercurrent of intense heat. She felt his awe of her, his clumsy attempts to hide it, his fierce, reckless loyalty, and beneath that, she felt the attraction he never spoke of. Instead of pulling away, she stepped closer. Her violet eyes locked onto his. The bioluminescence on her neck swirled in faster, brighter patterns. You are so loud, she had whispered, her voice echoing inside his head and in the air simultaneously. Your mind screams with worry. Why? Because you are important, Highness, he had stammered. Is that the only reason? She had tilted her head, leaning in. The space between them crackled. He could feel her emotions bleeding into his, a desperate need to be seen, not as a princess, but as a woman. She felt safer when he was near. She wanted to bridge the gap. Her lips had parted, he had leaned down. They were inches apart, the air humming with the potential energy of a lightning strike. Then the hangar bay doors hissed open. A squad of guards marched in. The moment shattered. She stepped back, the mask of royalty sliding back into place, but her eyes had lingered on his, full of a terrifying promise. End flashback. Jace opened his eyes in the dim cabin of the Wayward Star. He was alone. The silence was deafening. He stood up. Patch, keep the engines warm. Where are we going? I have a meeting, Jace said, grabbing his jacket. With a ghost? Admiral Varric did not live in the grime of the lower levels. He kept a suite in the high spire, an observation deck that looked down on the gas giant Halcyon orbited. It was a place of white marble and polished chrome. Jace bluffed his way past the perimeter security using an old override code that miraculously hadn't been scrubbed. Or perhaps Varric was just arrogant enough not to change it. He found the Admiral standing by the massive viewport, staring out at the swirling storms of the planet below. Varric turned as the doors hissed open. He was an older man, silver-haired, immaculate in a civilian suit that cost more than Jace's ship. He did not look surprised. "Lieutenant Kellen," Varric said, his voice smooth. "I was wondering how long it would take you to crawl out of the gutter." "It is Jace now," Jace said, walking into the room, his hands loose at his sides. "I gave up the rank when you gave up your honor." Varric chuckled, turning back to the window. "Dramatic? You always were. What do you want? Money? Reinstatement? I can have you flying a freighter by tomorrow if you agree to disappear." "I want to know where she is," Jace said quietly. Varric stiffened. He turned slowly, his eyes hard and flat. "She is dead. Jace, we all saw the report." "I saw the report you wrote," Jace said, stepping closer. "And I heard the recording where you sold her to Kale Dorn." The silence that followed was dangerous. Varric studied Jace like a bug under a microscope. He walked over to a crystal decanter and poured himself a drink. "You are playing a dangerous game with pieces you do not understand," Varric said softly. Princess Lyra was a threat to the stability of the Empire. Decisions had to be made, hard decisions, the kind men like you are too soft to make. "So you admit it," Jace said. "I admit nothing," Varric snapped. He took a sip of his drink. "But I will give you some advice for old time's sake. Do not chase dead princesses and suicidal ghosts. Jace, the universe is big. Go find a hole and rot in it. If you keep digging, you will find only your own grave." Jace stared at him, hatred boiling in his blood. He wanted to snap Varric's neck. It would be so easy. But if he did, the trail died with him. "You know, Admiral," Jace said, a dark, humorless smile touching his lips. "You always said I had a problem with authority. But my real problem is that I never know when to quit." "Then you will die," Varric said simply. "Security is on its way. I suggest you leave before they decide to practice their aim." Jace turned and walked out. He did not run. He walked with the deliberate pace of a man who had just made a decision that would end his life as he knew it. Back on the Wayward Star, Jace sat in the dark. A bottle of cheap whiskey sat on the console, half empty. The audio clip of Lyra played on a loop, soft and haunting. "I do not want to be a caged ornament. I feel safer when you are near." He looked at his hands. They were scarred, calloused, the hands of a mechanic and a soldier. He was a nobody, a washed-up pilot on a station in the middle of nowhere. But he was the only one who knew. The Empire had mourned her and moved on. The politicians had used her memory to pass laws she would have hated. Her own family had let her be erased. Tears, hot and angry, pricked at his eyes. He poured another shot and downed it. He knelt on the floor, the metal cold against his knees, the weight of the universe pressing down on his shoulders. "They abandoned the princess to her fate," Jace whispered into the darkness, his voice cracking. He looked up at the viewport, at the stars that were cold and distant and indifferent to suffering. "But I was the only one who swore to bring her back." The words hung there, transforming the air. It wasn't a statement, it was a vow. A covenant signed in blood and regret. Jace stood up. The trembling in his hands stopped. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. "Patch," he said, his voice steady. "Yeah, boss?" "Wipe my records from the station mainframe. Scramble our transponder ID. Load everything we have. We are leaving." "Leaving?" Patch asked. "To where? We have 40 credits and half a tank of fuel." "We are going to the Shroud," Jace said, flipping switches on the overhead console. The ship hummed to life, engines vibrating through the deck plates. "The shroud," Patch's voice rose an octave. "That is forbidden space, warlord territory. Physics does not even work right out there. It is suicide." "Probably," Jace said. He strapped himself into the pilot's seat. He felt fear, yes, a cold knot in his stomach. But for the first time in 3 years, he also felt a spark of something else, purpose. "It is either the stupidest thing I have ever done," Jace said, gripping the flight stick, "or the most romantic." "I am voting for stupid," Patch grumbled. "Noted," Jace said. He punched the throttle forward. "Hang on." The Wayward Star fired its thrusters, blasting away from the docking clamp. It streaked through the traffic lanes of Halcyon Station, a lone spark of defiance against the black void, heading straight for the darkness where a lost princess was waiting to be found. The inertial dampeners of the Wayward Star were rated for civilian transport, which meant they were woefully inadequate for the kind of burn Jace Kellen was currently putting them through. The ship screamed as it tore away from the magnetic docking clamps of Halcyon Station, the metal hull groaning in protest against the sudden, violent application of thrust. Jace slammed the throttle forward, pinning himself into the worn leather of the pilot's seat. On the main view screen, the sprawling, rotating ring of the station blurred into streaks of neon blue and dirty yellow. He was moving too fast for the traffic lanes, weaving between lumbering ore haulers and sleek corporate yachts with a recklessness that would have stripped him of his flight license instantly, if he hadn't already decided to throw his entire career into the incinerator. Warning, the ship's AI, Patch, droned over the cockpit speakers. "Engine core temperature is at critical levels. Structural integrity is at 88% and dropping. Also, you have 5 outstanding parking violations that are about to turn into warrants for your arrest." "Put it on my tab," Jace grunted, his hands dancing over the tactile controls. He banked hard to avoid a garbage scow, the G-force pressing the air from his lungs. "And reroute power from the life support reserves to the rear deflectors. They are going to start shooting any second now." "Rerouting," Patch replied, his voice taking on a distinctly judgmental tone. "I would like to note for the black box record that this is a statistically terrible idea. The odds of surviving a rogue mission into the outer rim with a clogged fuel injector and a pilot undergoing a midlife crisis are less than 4%. "Never tell me the odds, Patch," Jace muttered, checking the proximity sensors. "Just keep the engine from exploding until we hit the jump point. I am an algorithm, not a miracle worker. Jace, you haven't performed a level 3 maintenance cycle in 6 months. I feel dirty." Jace ignored the AI and focused on the radar. 3 security drones were hot on his tail, their red targeting lasers painting the rear hull of his ship. He gritted his teeth. He couldn't fire back, not at station security. These were just guys doing a job he used to do. He pulled back on the stick, flipping the Wayward Star into a tight corkscrew maneuver that sent the ship spiraling through the narrow gap between 2 massive orbital refineries. The drones couldn't make the turn. 2 of them peeled off, and the third clipped a solar array, spinning out of control. "Clear," Jace breathed, leveling the ship out as the stars stretched into infinity before him. The station was just a speck of light in the rearview mirror now. "Set a course for the Crucible coordinates, maximum burn." "Calculating route to Crucible Market," Patch said. "Estimated travel time, 48 hours. I hope you packed snacks. We are out of synthetic protein bars." Jace slumped back in his chair, the adrenaline crash hitting him all at once. He looked out at the cold, uncaring void. He was officially a criminal, a deserter, a man hunting a ghost. 48 hours, Jace whispered to the silence. "Hang on, Princess. I am coming." Crucible Market was not a place you went to find something. It was a place you went to get lost. It was a drifting abomination of a station, a cluster of hollowed-out asteroids welded together by centuries of desperate engineers and criminals. It hung in the dark void of the neutral zone, a chaotic tumbleweed of metal and rock held together by flickering gravity fields and sheer stubbornness. As Jace piloted the wayward star toward the docking bays, the visual assault was overwhelming. Holographic billboards the size of city blocks projected images of dancing alien girls and advertisements for illegal gene mods directly into the vacuum. The traffic here was a nightmare of unauthorized vessels, pirate corvettes, smuggler skiffs, and rusted salvage tugs, all jostling for position. Atmospheric scrubbers are detecting high levels of toxicity, Patch noted as they touched down on a landing pad that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Also, I am detecting 17 different types of illegal radiation. You might grow a third arm. Stay with the ship, Patch, Jace said, grabbing his heavy blaster pistol and sliding it into the holster at his hip. He threw a dark cloak over his shoulders. Lock the hatch. If anyone tries to board, vent the airlock. With pleasure, the AI chirped. Jace stepped out into the chaotic noise of the bazaar. The air smelled of ozone, burnt sugar, and alien sweat. The gravity here was artificial and unreliable. In some sectors, people walked with heavy leaden steps, while in others, they floated inches off the ground, tethered to stalls by magnetic boots. He pushed his way through the throng. Vendors shouted from stalls built into the rock walls, selling horrors and wonders in equal measure. To his left, a hooded figure was selling small glass vials of time-dilated drugs. One drop and a second felt like an hour. To his right, a stall displayed biotech pets that phased in and out of reality, shivering as they passed through the mesh of their cages. Further down, a row of booths offered emotion recorders where junkies could buy the recorded memories of someone else's joy or terror. Jace kept his head down, his amber eyes scanning the crowd. He wasn't here for sightseeing. He was here for Zevi. Zevi's establishment was a gaudy lounge carved deep into the central asteroid, marked by a neon sign that pulsed in a headache-inducing rhythm. The bouncer, a four-armed brute with chitinous skin, looked at Jace's scars and the way he carried himself, then stepped aside without a word. Inside, the music was a throbbing bass that vibrated in the teeth. Jace found Zevi in a private booth overlooking the dance floor. The information broker was a flamboyant avian hybrid, draped in shimmering silks of iridescent blue and green. He had a beak that curved sharply and eyes that blinked sideways. "Jace Kellen," Zevi squawked, spreading his feathered arms wide. "The pilot with the death wish. I heard you were cleaning toilets on Halcyon. What brings you to the armpit of the galaxy?" Jace slid into the booth, ignoring the drink Zevi pushed toward him. "I need information, Zevi, and I do not have time for your games." Zevi's eyes narrowed, the nictitating membranes flashing across them. "Everyone has time for games, darling. It is what keeps us from screaming at the void. What are you looking for?" "Princess Lyra," Jace said, his voice low. The music seemed to stop for a second in Zevi's booth, though the dance floor kept moving. Zevi laughed, a harsh, clicking sound. "Oh, this again. The tragic martyr, the lost little star, you humans and your sentimental attachments. She is space dust. Jace, let it go." "She was traded," Jace said, leaning across the table. "I have proof, a data chip from Admiral Varick's personal files. She was sold." Zevi's amusement vanished. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You are playing with fire, little pilot. If that is true, you are hunting a ghost in a graveyard owned by monsters." "Where is she?" Jace demanded. "It will cost you," Zevi said, rubbing his clawed fingers together. Information like that, it invites death. Name your price. Before Zevi could answer, a heavy hand landed on Jace's shoulder. Jace sighed. He didn't even look up. You are a long way from the barracks, Fed. A gravelly voice growled. Jace turned his head slightly. 3 mercenaries stood behind him. He recognized the type, ex-military, washed out, angry at the universe. One of them pointed at the faint outline of the neural interface port behind Jace's ear. I know that tech, the merc sneered. Special ops. You are the ones who glassed my homeworld during the insurrection. I was busy that day, Jace said, standing up slowly. I had a dentist appointment. The merc swung. Jace ducked, the fist smashing into the booth's upholstery. The bar brawl that ensued was brief, violent, and exactly the kind of stress relief Jace needed. He broke the first man's nose with a palm strike, kicked the second one in the knee with a sickening crunch, and threw the third one over the railing onto the dance floor below. He straightened his jacket and sat back down. Zevi was staring at him, feathers ruffled in excitement. Marvelous! Zevi clapped his hands. Such brutality. You really do care about her, don't you? It is disgusting. I love it. The location, Zevi, Jace said, wiping a speck of blood from his lip. Fine, fine, Zevi whispered, glancing around. She was not just sold, Jace. She was exiled. They sent her through an unstable quantum gate, an old smuggler's route that bypasses the Imperial blockades. To where? To the Shroud, Zevi said, the name landing with the weight of a coffin lid. Warlord Kale Dorn has her. He rules the Forbidden Sector. They say reality out there is suggestion, not law. And Kale? He collects rare things. A bioluminescent telepathic princess. She is the crown jewel of his collection. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's scrubbers. The Shroud. No one came back from the Shroud. Give me the coordinates of the gate, Jace said, standing up. I will transfer them, Zevi said, tapping a console on the table. But Jace, you are not going on a rescue mission. You are going to a funeral. Yours? Maybe, Jace said, turning to leave. But at least I will have good company. Light years away, in the heart of the Shroud, reality was holding its breath. Princess Lyra sat on the edge of a cold metallic slab in a chamber that was both opulent and terrifying. The walls were made of a dark, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb the light. Tapestries woven from conductive wire hung from the ceiling, depicting scenes of conquest and suffering. She ran her hand over her throat. A heavy collar of brushed steel was locked there, humming with a low, dissonant frequency. It was a dampener. She could feel it pressing down on her mind, suffocating the bright, expansive ocean of her telepathy until it was nothing but a muddy puddle. Her skin, usually alive with swirling violet bioluminescence, was dim, the markings barely visible against her pale complexion. She was alive. That was the only victory she had claimed so far. Lyra closed her eyes and focused. The collar limited her range, but it could not extinguish her gift entirely. She pushed her consciousness outward, straining against the static. She felt the guards outside her door, 2 of them. Hunger, boredom, a dull ache in the left knee, fear of the warlord. She caught fragments of their thoughts, like snatching flies from the air. It was useful intel. She knew their patrol schedules. She knew which one was easily distracted. But beneath the tactical analysis, a storm of emotion raged within her. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of knowing that the people she had sworn to serve had bartered her life away like currency. And Jace. The thought of him was a jagged splinter in her heart. She remembered the ambush. She remembered seeing his ship, the Wayward Star, Peel away. She remembered the voice of her own computer telling her that her escort had withdrawn. He left me. The thought was bitter poison. But then, another memory surfaced. The way he had looked at her in the maintenance bay. The raw, terrified adoration in his mind that he couldn't hide. Jace Kellen was reckless, cynical, and foolish. But he was not a coward. Did he try? She wondered, staring at the dark walls. Or was I just a mission he failed? The heavy blast doors hissed open. Warlord Cale Dorn strode in. He was a massive figure, encased in armor that looked like it had been grown rather than forged. His face was severe, scarred, with eyes that were entirely black. He brought with him the smell of ozone and burnt meat. "Princess," Cale said, his voice a deep rasp that seemed to vibrate the floor. "You are not eating. The nutrient paste is high quality. I prefer food that does not taste like despair," Lyra said, her voice steady. She lifted her chin, refusing to cower. "But perhaps that is the only flavor you have in this wretched rock you call a fortress." Cale chuckled, walking around her like a predator inspecting a trap. "Your spirit is intact. Good. Broken things are boring. They fetch a lower price." "Is that what I am?" Lyra asked, arching an eyebrow. "Merchandise? You speak of selling me, Kyle, but we both know you are afraid to let me go. You know what I am. You know what I can do." "I know you are a battery," Cale said, stopping in front of her. He reached out, his gauntleted hand hovering near her face. Lyra did not flinch. "A psychic amplifier, with the right modifications. I could use you to navigate the Shroud's deeper anomalies. Or I could sell you back to your mother's enemies. The auction is being prepared." Lyra pushed against the collar, stabbing a needle-thin probe of telepathic energy at his mind. She hit a wall, mental shielding, thick and disciplined. But she found a crack, a flash of insecurity. He needs the money. His fleets are failing. "You are broke," Lyra said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. "The great warlord Cale Dorn is running on fumes. That is why you need to sell me. You are not a conqueror. You are a desperate pawnshop owner." Cale's hand snapped out, gripping her chin. His grip was bruising. "Careful, Highness. Tongues can be removed without lowering your market value. And warlords can be replaced," she whispered, meeting his black eyes. "Do not forget, Cale, I am not just a princess. I am a weapon you do not know how to wield." He shoved her back and stormed out, the doors sealing with a heavy thud. Lyra let out a breath she had been holding. Her hands were shaking. She wrapped her arms around herself, the isolation crushing her. "Chase," she thought, projecting the name into the void, a silent scream. "Where are you?" Jace stared at the coordinates Zevi had given him. They led to a sector of space that didn't exist on any official map, a graveyard of dead stars and gravitational anomalies. The jump gate was hidden inside a nebula, a swirling cloud of purple gas and ionization. It wasn't a sleek imperial ring, it was an ancient, jagged structure, looking like the skeletal jaws of a giant beast. And it was guarded. An imperial cruiser, the Vigilant, sat silently in front of the gate. It was dark, running silent, clearly off the books. This was part of the conspiracy, the gatekeepers. "We are being hailed," Patch said. "They are charging weapons." "Put them on screen," Jace said, smoothing his hair and putting on his best "I belong here" grin. The face of a woman appeared on the comms. Captain Valeri. Jace felt a jolt of recognition. They had served together on the flagship years ago. She had been a lieutenant then, stiff and by the book, but he remembered a night in the officers' mess where she had laughed at his jokes a little too hard. "Unidentified vessel," Valerie said, her face stern. You are in a restricted zone. Prepare to be boarded or destroyed. Val! Jace exclaimed, leaning into the camera. Is that you? You look terrifying. I love the new scar. Is that from a duel or did you cut yourself shaving? Valerie blinked, her composure cracking for a microsecond. Kellen? Jace Kellen? In the flesh, Jace said. Look, I know this looks bad. Me and a junker creeping around a black site jump gate, but I can explain. You are a deserter, Valerie said, her hand hovering over the fire control. I should vaporize you right now. You could, Jace agreed. But then you would never know why I came all this way just to see you. Valerie hesitated. You are lying. I am charming, Jace corrected. There is a difference. Look, Val, I am running a classified op for Admiral Varric. Deep cover. That is why I am in this garbage scow, but if you scan my cargo, you will see... Well, you will see nothing because it is stealth cargo, very hush-hush. Patch, Jace hissed off mic. Fake a high-level authorization code. Now. I am literally making this up as I go, Patch whispered back, sending a gibberish string masked as a crypto key. Valerie looked at her console. The fake code flashed. It wasn't valid, but it was confusing enough to make her pause. This code is non-standard, she said. It is Section 9, Jace lied smoothly. If you verify it, you get flagged for audit. Do you want internal affairs going through your logs? Val? I know about the illegal brandy you keep in your quarters. Valerie stared at him. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then, she sighed. You were always a pain in the ass, Kellen, she said. If you go through that gate, you are on your own. I didn't see you, and if you come back, I will shoot you myself. I missed you too, Val, Jace saluted. Patch, hit it. The wayward star surged past the cruiser, diving into the center of the ancient gate. The transition was not like a normal hyperspace jump. Normal jumps were a blur of starlight. This was a descent into madness. As the ship crossed the event horizon, the universe shattered. The stars outside the viewport didn't streak, they fractured, turning into shards of broken glass. The silence of space was replaced by a roaring whisper that wasn't sound. It was a vibration in the bones. Warning! Patch screamed, his voice distorting, sounding like it was coming from underwater. Reality causality failure. Chronometer is running backwards. Jace gripped the stick, his vision blurring. Colors that had no names swirled outside. He saw ghost images of his own ship flying beside him. In one image, the wayward star was burning, exploding in slow motion. In another, Jace was old, gray-haired, sitting in the cockpit alone. In a third, he saw himself back at the ambush 3 years ago, but this time he rammed the enemy ship, dying in a ball of fire to save Lyra. "Ignore it!" Jace yelled, though he couldn't hear his own voice. "It is the shroud! It is messing with our heads!" I am seeing 17 versions of my own source code, Patch glitched. In one of them, I am a toaster. Jace, I do not want to be a toaster. The ship shook violently, bolts popping from the overhead panels. They were passing through the membrane of the shroud, the barrier between normal space and the twisted domain of the warlord, with a final sickening lurch that felt like falling down an elevator shaft. The stars snapped back into place, but they were wrong. The stars here were dim, red, and clustered in unnatural patterns. They had arrived. Systems rebooting, Patch groaned. I think I lost 3 seconds of my memory. Then where are we? We are in the shroud, Jace said, breathing hard. He looked at the scanner. And we have company. The radar lit up with 5 hostile contacts. Kyle Dorn's raiders. They didn't wait for a greeting. Green plasma fire erupted from the darkness, slamming into the Wayward Star's shields. "Shields down to 50%, Patch yelled. "Here we go." Jace grinned, the old combat pilot instinct taking over. The fear vanished, replaced by cold focus. The dogfight was a chaotic ballet. The space here was filled with drifting, house-sized shards of purple crystal that interfered with sensors. Gravity wells popped up randomly, tugging the ship sideways. Jace yanked the stick left, diving under a crystal shard as a raider slammed into it, exploding in a silent puff of debris. He spun the ship, firing his retro thrusters, flipping the Wayward Star end over end. He lined up a shot on the second raider and squeezed the trigger. His laser cannon spat red fire, dissecting the enemy ship. "2 down," Jace shouted. "3 to go." But the shroud fought back. A gravity wave hit them, spinning the ship like a top. A raider capitalized on the moment, raking Jace's starboard engine with heavy cannon fire. The ship screamed. Alarms blared. "Starboard engine critical," Patch warned. "We are losing thrust. We are going down." Jace wrestled with the controls, the stick kicking against his hand like a living thing. "I see a moon. Coordinates 390. I am putting us down." The moon was a jagged, ugly rock orbiting a gas giant that glowed with a sickly green light. Nereza, Kale's fortress world. The Wayward Star trailed smoke and fire as it plummeted toward the moon's surface. The atmosphere was thin, barely slowing them down. The ground rushed up, a landscape of gray dust and razor-sharp ridges. "Brace for impact," Jace yelled. He fired the maneuvering thrusters at the last second, pulling the nose up. The ship slammed into the dust, bouncing once, twice, shearing off a landing strut before skidding to a halt in a shower of sparks and rock. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. Jace sat in the dark cockpit, panting. Blood ran down his forehead into his eye. He was alive. "Patch," he croaked. "I am here," the AI replied, voice static-filled. "Hull breach in cargo bay 2. Engines are offline. We are grounded. Boss." Jace unbuckled his harness, his body screaming in protest. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against the cool console. He closed his eyes, trying to stop the room from spinning. And then he felt it. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a thought. It was a sensation. A sudden, intense warmth blooming in the center of his chest. "Jace?" It was faint, like a whisper across a canyon, but it was undeniable. It was her. On Nereza, in her high tower. Lyra gasped, dropping the glass of water she had been holding. It shattered on the stone floor. She clutched her chest, her eyes widening, her bioluminescence flaring bright violet for a single second. Overcoming the collar's dampening field, she felt him. He was here. He was hurt, scared and exhausted, but he was here. On the moon. Jace gasped too, his eyes snapping open. The connection was visceral. He could feel her shock, her sudden overwhelming hope, and beneath it all, a fierce, burning determination. It was like touching a live wire. For a moment, the distance between them collapsed. He wasn't in a crashed ship, he was with her. He felt the cold of her cell, the weight of the collar. She felt the blood on his face, the ache in his ribs. The connection severed as quickly as it had formed, leaving Jace breathless and shaking. He stared out the cracked viewport at the green glow of Nereza in the sky. "She knows," Jace whispered, a smile breaking through the blood and grime on his face. "She knows I am here." He reached for his weapon. "Patch, run a diagnostic on the life support, and I'm going outside to look for parts." "You are going to die," Patch said. "Eventually," Jace said, opening the airlock. "But not today." The headache arrived first, a rhythmic pounding behind Jace Kellen's eyes that matched the warning klaxon of the ship's proximity alarm. He peeled his face off the console, his cheek sticky with dried blood. and blinked at the cracked viewport. The view outside was not the comforting black of space. It was a landscape of slate-gray dust and jagged obsidian spires, illuminated by the sickly bioluminescent storms raging in the upper atmosphere. Gravity here was a suggestion rather than a law. Massive boulders, the size of cargo haulers, drifted lazily a few feet off the ground, bobbing in unseen currents. "Status," Jace croaked, his throat feeling like he had swallowed a handful of the gray dust outside. "Well, the good news is we are not dead." Patch's voice crackled from the overhead speakers. The AI sounded different, sharper, with a strange, clipped cadence. "The bad news is that the port stabilizer is currently located 300 meters behind us, and the life support system is trying to ferment the recycled air into wine. Also, I seem to have lost the file for optimism." Jace unbuckled his harness and stumbled out of the cockpit. The interior of the wayward star was a mess of sparking wires and fallen hydraulic lines. He grabbed a roll of industrial tape and a hydro spanner from a tool locker that had burst open. "We need to seal the hull," Jace muttered, forcing his aching limbs to move, "and fix the stealth drive. If Kale's patrols scan us, we are sitting ducks." He cycled the airlock and stepped out onto the moon's surface. The silence was absolute, pressing against his suit's helmet. The ground felt spongy under his magnetic boots. As he walked toward the severed fuel line, he saw movement in his peripheral vision. A creature, resembling a six-legged wolf made of smoke and glass, skittered across the dunes. As it approached a large rock, it didn't climb over it. It simply dissolved, passing through the solid stone-like mist before reforming on the other side. "Did you see that?" Jace asked, his voice rising slightly. "See what?" Patch replied in his ear. "I am currently busy calculating the probability of us starving to death. It is 99%. Wait, no, 98%. I found a half-eaten protein bar in your bunk." "The ghost wolf thing," Jace said, keeping his blaster hand free as he taped up the fuel line. "It just phased through a rock. This place is a nightmare." "It is the Shroud," Patch said, his voice glitching into a deep baritone for a second before returning to normal. "Local reality coherence is unstable. Physics is bored here, so it is making up new rules. Hurry up, Jace. I am detecting an ion storm forming. If it hits us with the shields down, it will scramble my core and boil your blood, in that order." Jace worked faster, his hands shaking. It wasn't just the cold or the adrenaline crash, it was the knowledge that she was close. Every time he looked up at the massive, swirling green gas giant of Nereza hanging in the sky, he felt a pull in his chest, magnetic and terrifying. He was a mechanic fixing a broken bird on a haunted rock, armed with nothing but sarcasm and a blaster, planning to invade a warlord's fortress. "This is ridiculous," Jace muttered, wrenching a bolt tight. "I am going to get killed by a ghost wolf or boiled by a storm, all for a girl who probably thinks I am an idiot." "Correction," Patch said. "She definitely thinks you are an idiot. But she is also the only person who ever laughed at your jokes. So, the risk assessment balances out." High above the moon, in the obsidian citadel of Nereza, Princess Lyra stood in a room that smelled of ozone and expensive perfume. It was a council chamber, though it felt more like an execution viewing gallery. Warlord Kale Dorn sat at the head of a long table made of floating black stone. Lyra stood to the side, her hands bound in front of her with energetic cuffs that hummed against her wrists. The dampening collar around her throat felt heavier today, a lead weight designed to keep her head bowed. She refused to lower her chin. "The offer is substantial," a holographic figure at the center of the table said. The figure was distorted, face obscured by digital static, but the voice was unmistakably aristocratic. It dripped with the refined accent of the imperial core. The removal of the princess was necessary, but her return, under controlled circumstances, could be useful. Lyra's blood ran cold. She recognized the cadence. It was Lord Vane, one of her mother's most trusted advisors. The conspiracy wasn't just a rogue admiral. It was the throne room itself. "She is a potent asset," Cale said, leaning back, his armored fingers drumming on the stone. He looked at Lyra like a man appraising a prize racehorse. "Her telepathic range has increased since her arrival in the Shroud. The energy here stimulates her biology." "We do not want her for her mind," Vane's hologram replied sharply. "We want her as a figurehead, a puppet queen to quell the riots in the outer sectors. We will buy her back, Cale. But she must be broken first. We need a shell, not a spark." Lyra kept her face impassive, masking the horror churning in her gut. They were discussing her lobotomy, her reduction to a pretty mindless doll, with the casual tone of merchants haggling over grain. "I will consider it," Cale said, waving his hand to dismiss the hologram. The image faded. Cale turned his black eyes to Lyra. "You hear that, Highness? Your own people want to hollow you out. Perhaps you should be grateful I only keep you in a cage." "A cage is still a cage, Cale," Lyra said, her voice cool and steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "And eventually, the tiger eats the zookeeper." Cale laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Take her to the lab. Monitor her levels. If she is to be sold, I want her shining." The guards dragged her out. They took her not to her cell, but to the biolab, a sterile white room filled with humming machinery. The head researcher was absent, leaving only a junior technician, a young human man with nervous eyes and a datapad he held like a shield. Lyra sat on the examination table. She spotted it immediately. A small, crystalline device resting on a tray of instruments. A fractal key. It was a universal decryption tool used for bypassing complex energy locks. Cale's scientists must have been studying it. She needed it. She looked at the young technician. He was checking her vitals on a monitor, avoiding her gaze. His mind was loud, a chaotic mix of fear, awe, and a suppressed attraction he was ashamed of. Lyra took a slow breath, pushing against the collar's dampening field. She couldn't blast him with power, but she could nudge. She could whisper. "You are new," Lyra said softly. She shifted slightly, the light catching the violet swirls on her skin. The technician jumped. Yes, Highness, prisoner. I am not supposed to talk to you." "It is lonely here, isn't it?" Lyra asked, her voice dipping into a lower, warmer register. She projected a feeling of empathy, wrapping it around his mind like a warm blanket. "I can feel your isolation. You miss home, the blue skies, the rain." The technician stopped typing. He looked at her, entranced. Her violet eyes locked onto his. She wasn't just beautiful, she was overwhelming. She was a siren song made of light and empathy. "I do miss the rain," he whispered. "Come closer," Lyra said, tilting her head. "The collar, it chafes. Could you adjust it? Just a little? Please." She poured a concentrated dose of desire and trust into his mind. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. It was a violation of his autonomy, and the guilt tasted bitter on her tongue. But she remembered Lord Vane's voice. "We need a shell." She would not be a shell. The technician stepped forward, his eyes glazed. I can loosen it. Just for a moment." He leaned in, his hands trembling as he reached for her neck, as he fiddled with the clasp. Lyra leaned forward, her lips brushing his ear. "Thank you." she breathed. Her hand moved with a speed that belied her calm demeanor. She snatched the fractal key from the tray and palmed it, sliding it into the sleeve of her tunic in one fluid motion. "There," the technician said, stepping back, blinking as if waking from a dream. "Is that better?" "Much better," Lyra said, her eyes turning cold again. "You should go, before Kale finds you being so kind." The technician fled, confused and flushed. Lyra waited until the door hissed shut. She pulled the fractal key from her sleeve. It pulsed with a faint blue light. She pressed the device against the underside of her collar. It whined, interfacing with the locking mechanism. The dampening field didn't vanish, but it flickered, a hole opening in the psychic static. Lyra didn't hesitate. She closed her eyes and screamed with her mind. She didn't send words. She sent a pulse, a shockwave of pure mental energy aimed at the one soul she knew was out there. Jace. Jace was deep inside the access panel of the Wayward Star, wrestling with a fused circuit board. When the world turned white, it wasn't a visual whiteness. It was an explosion inside his head. He dropped the hydro spanner and fell backward, hitting the deck plates hard. "Jace!" The voice was everywhere. It was in his blood, in his marrow. It was desperate and furious and terrified. "Lyra!" he gasped aloud, clutching his temples. The connection slammed into place, sharper and more violent than before. He could feel her. She was sitting in a cold room, smelling of antiseptic. Her heart was racing. She was angry at him, at the universe, at herself. "You reckless, stupid idiot." Her thought voice rang in his skull, clear as a bell. "What are you doing here? You should have run." Jace laughed, a ragged, breathless sound. He projected his own thoughts back, clumsy and unrefined compared to hers, but raw with honesty. "I tried running," he thought. "I got bored. The pay was terrible." He felt her shock, followed by a surge of warmth that nearly brought him to his knees. It was relief. Overwhelming. Crushing relief. "You are alive," she sent, the anger crumbling into something fragile. "I felt you crash. I thought..." "I am hard to kill," Jace thought back. "I am on the moon, fixing the ship. I am coming for you. Lyra, I swear it. Do not come," she pleaded, though he could feel the lie in it. She wanted him to come more than she wanted to breathe. "It is a fortress. Jace, Kale has an army, and the Empire. They are involved. It is a trap." "I know," Jace thought. "I do not care. Just tell me where to go. Tell me how to get in." He felt her hesitation, her fear for him warring with her need. Then, a stream of data flooded his mind, images of a landing bay, a ventilation grid, a security rotation, and coordinates. Not just numbers, but a spatial sense of where she was. The North Tower. She sent. The confinement level. "But Jace, if you die, I will never forgive you." "If I die," Jace thought, "I will come back and haunt you, I promise." The fractal key in Lyra's hand sparked and overheated, burning her palm. The connection severed instantly. Jace lay on the floor of his ship, panting as if he had run a marathon. The silence of the moon returned, but it felt different now. It wasn't empty. "Patch," Jace said, scrambling to his feet. "I have the location, and I know where we can get help." "Help?" Patch asked. "We are on a moon populated by ghost wolves and rocks. Who are you planning to ask?" "The rocks?" "There is a settlement," Jace said, pulling up the map Zevi had given him. "About 50 clicks north. A smuggler's den. If anyone knows how to crack a fortress, it is the people hiding in its shadow." The settlement was a scar on the face of the moon. It was a cluster of pressurized domes and scrap metal shacks huddled inside a deep crater, shielded from the ion storms by a flickering jury-rigged force field. It didn't have a name, just a reputation. Jace parked the Wayward Star under a camouflage tarp a few miles out and walked the rest of the way. He pulled his hood low, hiding his face. The airlock to the main dome hissed open, admitting him into an atmosphere thick with smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. This was the drain of the galaxy. Deserters, criminals, and refugees who had fled the Shroud's madness only to get stuck on Kale's doorstep. Jace navigated the mud-slicked streets to the largest structure, a cantina built from the hollowed-out hull of a crashed frigate. The sign above the door simply read, "Drink." Inside, the noise was deafening. Jace pushed his way to the bar, ignoring the glares of a group of four-armed mercenaries. He scanned the room. Zevi's intel had been specific. Find a man named Drax, an ex-lieutenant of Kale's army who had defected. He found him at a card table in the back. Drax was a mountain of a man, or mostly man. Half his face was replaced with cybernetics, a glowing red optic sensor whirring where his left eye should have been. He was dealing cards to a table of nervous-looking aliens. Jace walked over and pulled up a chair. "Table is full," Drax growled, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "I am small," Jace said, tossing a handful of credit chips onto the table. "Deal me in." Drax stared at him with his good eye, then shrugged. "Your funeral, little man." The game was a variation of Saber, a high-stakes card game involving shifting holographic suits. Jace had no idea how to play. "Patch," Jace whispered subvocally. "What am I looking at?" "It appears to be a localized variant," Patch whispered in his ear. "The rules are mathematically inconsistent. However, based on the betting patterns, I suggest you hold the blue card." Jace held the blue card. "Fold." An alien with tentacles for a beard grumbled, throwing his cards down. "Fold," another player said. Drax grinned, revealing metal teeth. "I call." He slammed down a hand of fiery red cards. "Full Nova." "Is that good?" Jace asked innocently. He laid down his hand. "I have 5 blue circles." The table went silent. Drax's cybernetic eye whirred loudly as it zoomed in on the cards. 5 moons, Drax muttered. That is the highest hand in the deck. It has a probability of 1 in 6 million. Jace scooped up the pot of credits. Lucky me. 2 hands later, Jace won again with a void flush that Patch assured him was statistically impossible. By the 4th hand, Drax was turning a shade of purple that matched the Shroud's sky. "You are cheating," Drax roared, slamming his massive fist onto the table. The other players scattered like roaches. Drax stood up, towering over Jace, drawing a jagged vibro blade from his belt. "No one is that lucky." Jace didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, shuffling the credits. "You are right. I am not lucky. I am desperate. And I hear you are the man to talk to if you hate Kale Dorn." Drax paused, the blade hovering inches from Jace's nose. He looked around the cantina, paranoid. "Who sent you?" "A mutual friend who deals in secrets," Jace said. "I need to get into Nereza." Drax stared at him, then threw his head back and laughed. It was a booming, terrifying sound. "Into Nereza? You want to commit suicide? Go jump out the airlock. It is cheaper." "I am serious," Jace said, his voice dropping the humor. "I am going to steal something from him." Drax sat back down, the chair groaning under his weight. He sheathed the knife. "You cannot steal from Coil. He sees everything. What is the prize? Gold? Isotope cores?" "The princess," Jace said. Drax went still. He leaned in close, the smell of cheap engine oil and stale beer wafting off him. "The glowing girl? The trophy?" "She is not a trophy," Jace snapped, his hand drifting to his blaster. "That is exactly what she is," Drax said, his voice dripping with bitterness. I used to run the perimeter guard. I have seen the ceremonies. Every month, when the high rollers come to beg for favors, Cale drags her out, puts her in chains made of spun light, parades her around like a pet. He makes her kneel, makes her use her lights to entertain them. Jace felt a surge of rage so pure it nearly blinded him. His vision tunneled, the image of Lyra, proud, regal Lyra, forced to kneel for a room full of criminals, made his blood boil. He gripped the edge of the table, the metal bending under his fingers. He humiliates her, Jace whispered. He breaks her down. He tries, Drax corrected, but that one, she is tough. I have seen her look Cale in the eye while on her knees and smile like she is the one holding the leash. That is why I left. I can stomach killing, but I cannot stomach a man who needs to break women to feel powerful. Drax looked at Jace, measuring him. You are the pilot, aren't you? The one the rumors say she waits for. I am the guy who is going to burn that fortress to the ground, Jace said. Are you in? Drax looked at the pile of credits Jace had won. He looked at the exit. Then he looked at the scar on his own arm, a brand from Cale's service. I want Varric, Drax said. The Admiral. He is coming for the auction. You get the girl. I get a clear shot at the man who sold my unit out to be slaughtered. Deal, Jace said. That night, Jace couldn't sleep. He lay in the bunk of the Wayward Star, staring at the ceiling plates. The rage was still simmering, a low heat in his gut, but beneath it was a vast, hollow ache. He closed his eyes and reached out. He didn't know how to do it. He wasn't telepathic, but he poured his intent into the dark. Lyra, high in her tower. Lyra stood by the window, watching the storm clouds swirl over the outlaw settlement. She felt him reaching. It was clumsy, like a child trying to grasp a butterfly, but it was him. She closed her eyes and reached back. The connection snapped into place, but this time, it wasn't words. It was a memory. Flashback. The maintenance bay of the flagship, 3 years ago. The air smelled of hydraulic fluid and ozone. Jace was sitting on a crate, nursing a bruised knuckle from a training exercise. Lyra had come to find him, escaping a diplomatic dinner that was suffocating her. Does it hurt? She had asked, her voice echoing in the vast empty hangar. Only when I think about it, Jace had quipped, not looking at her. She had stepped closer, the hem of her gown dragging on the greasy floor. She didn't care. She reached out and took his hand, her cool fingers tracing the bruise. You fight too much, she whispered. I fight so you do not have to, he replied, looking up. The distance between them vanished. The hum of the ship's engines faded. She was so close he could see the individual specks of gold in her violet eyes. Her bioluminescence flared soft and warm, a silent language of desire. I am not just a symbol, Jace, she said, her voice trembling. I am terrified that one day I will wake up and that is all I will be. A statue in a hall, cold and perfect and dead. Never, Jace swore. He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek. Her skin was soft, electric. You are the most alive thing I have ever known. She leaned into his touch. Her breath hitched. He leaned in. Their lips were millimeters apart. He could feel the warmth of her breath. Taste the sweetness of the moment. It was a promise. A terrifying, beautiful precipice. End flashback, Jace gasped, waking in his bunk. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His hand was raised in the air, cupping a face that wasn't there. On Nereza. Lyra woke with a start, her hand pressed to her lips. Her cheeks were wet with tears. The memory was gone, but the feeling remained. A physical ache of longing so intense it felt like a wound. They were miles apart, separated by stone walls and armed guards. But in that moment, they had never been closer. Jace sat up in the dark, his jaw set. "Hold on," he whispered to the empty ship. "I am coming." He grabbed his blaster and headed for the cockpit. Dawn was coming, and with it, the war. The stolen transport shuttle shuddered as it hit the upper atmosphere of Nereza, the vibrations rattling the loose teeth of every bolt in the hull. Jace Kellen gripped the yoke with sweaty palms, his knuckles white, while Drax sat in the co-pilot seat, looking like a boulder that had been shoved into a glove compartment. "This is a terrible plan," Drax grunted, adjusting the collar of his disguise, a garish merchant's tunic that clashed violently with his cybernetic eye. "We are flying a garbage scow into the most heavily fortified rock in the sector, armed with a fake manifest and your smile. We are going to die." "My smile has gotten me out of worse situations," Jace shot back, though his stomach was currently doing gymnastics. "Remember the incident on Io with the ambassador's daughter? You ended up in a trash compactor," Drax reminded him. "But I was alive," Jace pointed out, "and I smelled like lavender for a week. Now shut up. We are being hailed." The comms unit crackled to life, the audio wave spiking red. A voice, cold and stripped of any organic warmth, filled the cramped cockpit. "Unidentified transport. You are entering restricted airspace. Transmit clearance codes and cargo manifest immediately. Deviation will result in immediate vaporization." Jace cleared his throat, pitching his voice into a register of bored, arrogant commerce. "Nereza Control. This is the Transport Gilded Lily. We are carrying high-end entertainment tech for Warlord Kale's gathering, sensory immersion rigs, neurostimulators, the works. If you vaporize us, the Warlord is going to have a very boring party, and I imagine he will use your head as a centerpiece." There was a pause. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, an eternity in a combat zone. Scanners washed over the ship, a palpable hum that made the hairs on Jace's arms stand up. "Cargo density matches generic tech profiles," the voice returned, sounding suspicious. "Proceed to Hangar Bay 4. Prepare for physical inspection. Any deviation from the flight path will be met with lethal force." "Understood. Control," Jace said, cutting the link. He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "See? Charm. They are going to inspect us," Drax growled, checking the charge on his concealed blaster. "If they open the crates and find they are full of scrap metal and rusted droid parts, your charm is not going to stop a plasma bolt." "Then we better hope the inspector is easily distracted," Jace said, guiding the ship down toward the sprawling fortress city. Nereza was a nightmare constructed of black stone and green fire. As they descended, the fortress revealed itself as a series of towering, jagged spires that pierced the smog-choked sky. Plasma-lit banners, 50 feet long, draped from the battlements, displaying Kale's sigil, a shattered sun. The hangar bay was a cavernous maw, large enough to swallow a destroyer. As the Gilded Lily touched down, the landing gear groaning, Jace looked out the viewport. The deck was swarming with soldiers in armor laced with shifting circuitry, living metal that adapted to environmental threats. Above them, spherical security drones drifted like silent, metallic eyes, their sensors sweeping the area. "Listen," Jace whispered as the boarding ramp hissed open. "Let me do the talking. You just look big and menacing. It is what you are good at." "I hate you," Drax muttered. They walked down the ramp into the humid, ozone-scented air of the hangar. An officer awaited them, flanked by 2 guards with heavy rifles. The officer was a twi-human with pale skin and eyes that looked like broken glass. He held a scanner that was pinging rapidly. "Manifest says entertainment tech," the officer said. Stepping forward, he didn't blink. This ship smells like a sewer. It is a vintage aroma, Jace said smoothly, stepping in front of Drax. Part of the authenticity. We trade in rare goods. Officer, the smell keeps the thieves away. Now, these crates contain delicate neural links. If you open them here, the humidity will ruin the calibration. I am sure Warlord Dorn would be displeased if his guests put on a headset and fried their brains because of a procedural error. The officer narrowed his eyes. Standard protocol requires visual confirmation. Standard protocol is for standard deliveries, Jace countered, leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But between us, these units are strictly illicit, Imperial contraband. If you open them, the logging system on your scanner will flag the illegal tech signatures. You will be buried in paperwork for a month. Or, you can scan the crate's outer ID tags, verify the shipment, and let us get this volatile merchandise out of your hangar. Jace flashed a smile, the one that usually got him free drinks, or punched. He held his breath. The officer looked at Jace, then at the massive, hulking figure of Drax, who grunted and cracked his knuckles. Fine, the officer spat. Move them to the lift, but if my sensors pick up a single weapon, I will have you spaced. You are a gentleman and a scholar, Jace said, nodding to Drax. Grab the crates, big guy. As they moved deeper into the fortress, pushing a hover cart loaded with decoy crates, Jace glanced up. A speaker system mounted on the walls broadcasted a soothing, artificial voice. Attention! Emotional monitoring is in effect. Please maintain baseline serotonin levels. Spikes in aggression or fear will result in immediate detention. Great, Jace muttered. A mood ring fortress. Keep your heart rate down. Drax. I have no heart, Drax grumbled. Only rage and cholesterol. High above the hangar, in the grand hall of Nereza, Princess Lyra stood like a statue carved from ice and starlight. The hall was a testament to Kale's ego, a vast chamber of polished obsidian and gold, filled with the galaxy's worst people, smugglers, warlords, and shadowed emissaries from the imperial court mingled, drinking wine that cost more than the annual budget of a small moon. Lyra had been forced into ceremonial attire that made her skin crawl. It was a gown of translucent, shifting fabric that clung to her like a second skin, leaving her shoulders and back bare. The bioluminescent markings on her skin, usually a source of pride, were on display for everyone to gawk at. She felt exposed, a jewel pulled from a vault and placed in a cage for amusement. The dampening collar was still around her neck, hidden beneath a choker of diamonds, but its weight was a constant reminder of her leash. Smile. Highness. Kale's voice rasped in her ear. He stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. You look like you are at a funeral. I am, Lyra replied, her voice cool and sharp. She turned to him, her violet eyes flashing. I am mourning your dignity. Kale, it died the moment you decided to parade me around like a prize poodle. Do you think these people respect you? They are laughing at you. A warlord who needs a princess to feel important. Kyle's grip tightened, his fingers digging into her skin. Careful. I can sell you to the highest bidder tonight. There is a slaver from the Outer Rim who has been eyeing you for the last hour. Let him look, Lyra said, pulling away from his touch. If he touches me, I will shatter his mind, collar or not. She walked away from him, moving through the crowd with a grace that silenced the room. She held her head high, refusing to shrink. She heard the whispers, felt the greedy, lustful thoughts brushing against her mental shields. She is beautiful. Broken, dangerous, mine. She blocked them out, focusing on the rhythm of her breathing. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing drone, not to drink, but to have something to hold, a weapon, if necessary. Princess Lyra, a voice oozed. A rotund man with gills and a velvet suit blocked her path. A pleasure. I heard you were lost. I was never lost, Lyra said, looking through him. I was merely misplaced by incompetent men. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to find air that hasn't been breathed by traitors. She swept past him, heading toward the balcony doors, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was terrified. She was alone in a room full of monsters, but she would not let them see it. Jace was in the ceiling, or rather, in a cramped service passage that ran directly above the grand hall. He peered through a ventilation grate, the sounds of the party drifting up, laughter, clinking glass, the low hum of conversation. And then he saw her. Time didn't stop, it expanded. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. She was standing near a pillar of dark stone, the light from the chandeliers catching the shimmer of her gown. She looked impossibly regal, a creature of light in a world of shadow. But Jace, who had spent hours memorizing the way she moved, saw the truth. He saw the tension in her shoulders. He saw the way her fingers gripped the stem of the glass until her knuckles were white. He saw the haunted, hollow look in her eyes as she scanned the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. God, Jace whispered, the word escaping him like a prayer. Lyra. He was mesmerized. He had remembered her beauty, but he had forgotten the sheer force of her presence, and he was terrified. She looked so fragile, surrounded by wolves. Stop drooling, Drax whispered from behind him. We have a job to do. I am not drooling, Jace hissed. I am assessing the target. You are staring like a lovesick puppy, Drax said. Move, a patrol is coming down the corridor. They scrambled further into the maintenance shaft, which was barely wide enough for Jace, let alone Drax. Suddenly, a whirring sound echoed in the darkness. What is that? Drax asked. A small, spherical cleaning bot, clearly malfunctioning, careened around the corner. Its optical sensor flashed an angry red. Sanitation violation detected, the bot chirped in a high-pitched electronic voice. Biological contaminants identified. Oh no, Jace groaned. The bot deployed a nozzle and unleashed a torrent of industrial-grade cleaning foam directly into Jace's face. Gah! Jace spluttered, wiping the white sludge from his eyes. It is in my mouth. It tastes like lemon and chemical burns. Kill it, Drax hissed, trying to squeeze past Jace but getting wedged against a pipe. Quietly. I cannot see, Jace shouted, batting at the bot. The bot beeped happily and sprayed Drax in the cybernetic eye. I am going to disassemble you, Drax roared in a whisper, grabbing the slippery bot with both hands. The bot spun its wheels, covering them both in another layer of foam before Drax finally managed to find the power switch and deactivate it. They sat there for a moment in the dark shaft, covered in white suds, breathing hard. We are elite infiltrators, Jace said, spitting out foam. We are legends. Shut up, Drax said. Or just shut up. Jace wiped his face, suppressing a hysterical giggle. The absurdity of it, hiding in a vent, covered in soap, while the love of his life was 50 feet below being held hostage by a warlord, was almost too much. But the humor broke the tension. It grounded him. Okay, Jace said, wiping his hands on his tunic. Let's get clean. And then let's get her. Lyra stood near the balcony, staring at the closed doors. She felt a sudden shift in the air, a vibration in the floorboards, a pull. She turned slowly, her gaze lifting to the high, shadowed arches of the ceiling near the ventilation grates. She didn't see him, not with her eyes, but her mind, sharpened by desperation and the fractal key's earlier boost, pierced the shadows. Jace. He was there. For a single, electrified second, their gazes met across the vast distance, her violet eyes locking onto the darkness where he hid. The connection slammed into her. It wasn't a gentle touch, but it was a collision. She felt his shock at seeing her. She felt his overwhelming relief that she was unharmed. She felt his anger at the collar around her neck. And beneath it all, she felt a raw, burning desire that made her knees weak. He was looking at her not as a princess, not as a mission, but as the only thing in the universe that mattered. Lyra's breath hitched. Her mask of icy composure cracked. Her lips parted, her hand coming up to her throat. The sheer volume of emotion crashing between them was dizzying. "You came," she thought, the words a silent sob. Then, reality rushed back in. She saw a guard noticing her distraction. She saw Kale turning toward her. If she reacted, if she showed weakness or hope, Kale would know. He would hunt Jace down and kill him before he could make a move. Lyra forced her face into a mask of boredom. She broke the gaze, turning her back on the ceiling grate with a deliberate, dismissive motion. She took a sip of her champagne, though her hand was trembling so hard the liquid rippled. "Wait," she projected, a whisper of steel. Not yet. The security override codes Drax had provided worked barely. Jace slipped through the service door into the residential wing of the fortress. The corridors here were quieter, lined with tapestries and guarded by automated turrets that Jace bypassed with a scrambler loop. He reached the door to Lyra's private chamber. It was locked with a biometric seal. "Patch," Jace whispered into his comms. "I need a bypass." "Working on it," Patch replied. "I am routing a false signal through the door's logic gate. 3, 2, 1. The lock clicked. The door hissed open. Jace stepped inside. The room was large, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of the same perfume Lyra had worn years ago. She was standing by the window, her back to him, still wearing the shimmering gown. She had clearly been waiting. "Lyra," Jace said, his voice cracking. She turned. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Then, Lyra moved. She didn't run to him for a hug. She crossed the room with the speed of a striking viper. She raised her hand, and a surge of telekinetic force, raw and unrefined, slammed into Jace's chest. He flew backward, hitting the wall with a heavy thud. The breath left his lungs. "You took 3 years!" Lyra screamed, the icy composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. She advanced on him, her eyes blazing, the bioluminescence on her skin flaring so bright it hurt to look at. 3 years. Jace, I waited. I counted the days. I thought you were dead. I thought you abandoned me." She shoved him again with her mind, pinning him against the wall. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I am sorry," Jace gasped, not fighting back. He held his hands up, palms open. "I am so sorry. You left me to die," she cried, her voice breaking into a sob. She hit his chest with her actual fist this time. Weak, desperate blows. "You left me alone in the dark." "I know," Jace whispered. He caught her wrists. She struggled for a second, then collapsed against him, the fight draining out of her. "I thought you were never coming." She sobbed into his chest. "I am here," Jace said, his voice thick with tears. "I am here, Lyra. I swear on my life, I am here." The dynamic shifted in a heartbeat. The anger didn't vanish, it transmuted into something else, something hotter. Lyra looked up at him, her face wet, her eyes wild. She pulled her hands free and grabbed the front of his tunic, yanking him down. Then she laughed, a wet, hysterical sound, and punched him in the shoulder. "You look terrible. You are covered in... Is that soap?" "Cleaning bot." Jace choked out a laugh. tears spilling over. It was a tactical error. He reached up, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. He ran his thumbs over the bioluminescent swirls on her cheekbones. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes, letting out a shuddering breath. "You are real," she whispered. "I am real," Jace said. He lowered his head. They stood inches apart, breathing the same air. The tension that had been building for 3 years, spanning light years of distance, finally snapped. Jace kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate. It was a collision of mouths, a starving man finding water. Lyra made a sound in her throat, a whimper of need, and pressed herself against him, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Jace groaned, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly off the floor. The kiss deepened, becoming frantic. He tasted the champagne on her tongue, the salt of her tears. His hands roamed over the silk of her gown, finding the warmth of her skin beneath. Lyra kissed him back with a ferocity that matched his own. She bit his lip, her hands clutching his shoulders, anchoring herself to him. The world outside, the fortress, the warlord, the conspiracy, ceased to exist. There was only this, the heat of his body, the rough texture of his hands, the overwhelming, terrifying realization that she was finally safe. They broke apart only when they needed oxygen, panting, foreheads resting against each other. Jace's hands were still on her face, holding her like she might vanish if he let go. "I missed you," Jace whispered, his voice wrecked. "Every second, I missed you." "I hated you," Lyra whispered back, though her eyes were soft. "I hated you for making me want you this much." They moved to the edge of her large, ornate bed, sitting side by side. They didn't lie down. There wasn't time, and the danger was too close. They just sat, knees touching, hands intertwined, grounding themselves. The silence was heavy but intimate. "I have nightmares," Lyra said quietly, looking at their joined hands. "That I am back in the shuttle, that the rift opens and I am falling forever, and no one remembers my name. They just remember the princess, the symbol." Jace squeezed her hand. I remember how you take your coffee. I remember that you hum when you are nervous. I remember that you cheat at chess." Lyra let out a watery laugh. "I do not cheat. I improvise. I hated myself," Jace confessed, his voice low. "When the order came to retreat, my ship was overridden. But I should have fought harder. I should have ejected. I should have done something. For 3 years, I woke up wishing I had died in that debris field instead of leaving you." Lyra turned to him. She reached out and touched the scar on his jaw. "You are here now. That is all that matters. You came back." "I told you," Jace said, looking into her eyes. "They abandoned you to your fate, but I was the only one who swore to bring you back." Lyra's markings glowed a soft, steady violet. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have to go. Kale will notice I am gone." "We have a plan," Jace said, shifting into soldier mode, though he didn't let go of her hand. "Drax is rigging the shield generators to blow. At the next gathering, tomorrow night, you use the fractal key." "The control node," Lyra nodded, her voice sharpening. "If I can interface with the central core, I can turn the fortress defenses against the guards. I can open the hangar doors." "Exactly," Jace said. "While you create chaos, Drax and I will hit the data vault. We need the proof. Lyra, the recordings of Varric and your mother's advisors. If we leave without that, they will just hunt us down again. We need to expose them." "It is dangerous," Lyra said. "Kale will be there. The AI shard he uses to control the fortress. It is powerful. We can do it, Jace said. Together. He stood up. He had to go. Staying any longer risked everything. I have to get back to the service tunnels, Jace said, reluctance heavy in his voice. Lyra stood up and grabbed his arm. She pulled him back to her. One more, she commanded softly. She kissed him again. This time, it wasn't frantic. It was slow, deliberate. It was a kiss that tasted of promise and defiance. She pressed her body against his, letting him feel every curve, every heartbeat. Her markings flared bright, illuminating the dim room in a violet haze. It towed the line of propriety. On it was a kiss that said, if we survive this, nothing will ever be the same. They broke apart, breathless. Survive, Lyra whispered, her hand lingering on his chest over his heart. Do not die trying to be a hero. Jace Kellen. I am no hero, Jace said, backing toward the door, his eyes never leaving hers. I am just a guy who knows a good investment when he sees one. He slipped out the door and into the shadows. Lyra stood alone in the center of the room, her lips still tingling, her heart beating a war drum. She touched the fractal key hidden in her sleeve. Let them come, she whispered to the empty room. We are ready. The Grand Hall of Nereza was not just a room. It was a sensory assault designed to make the powerful feel like gods and the weak feel like insects. The ceiling, vaulted and lost in shadow 300 feet above, did not show stone or steel, but a live feed of the shroud's chaotic nebula, swirling in violets and bruised blacks. Tonight, the fortress hummed with a terrifying vitality. Kael Dorn was hosting the galaxy's most dangerous show and tell. The air vibrated with music that defied standard composition. A dissonant, shifting melody played on instruments carved from crystallized bone. The sound waves seemed to bend light, making the guests shimmer and blur as if reality itself were losing its cohesion. Princess Lyra stood at the center of it all, a prisoner disguised as a goddess. She wore the ceremonial gown Kael had forced upon her, a garment of woven optical fibers that pulsed in time with the music. To the observers, corrupt imperial admirals, heads of criminal syndicates, and masked brokers from the unknown regions, she was the ultimate trophy, a tame telepath, a living battery. Smile, my dear, Kael murmured, stepping up beside her. He wore ceremonial armor, black and gold, with a gravity manipulation gauntlet humming on his left arm. The auction begins in 1 hour. Do not devalue yourself with a frown. I am not frowning, Lyra replied, her voice smooth and perfectly modulated. I am contemplating which of your guests will betray you first. Kael laughed, a sharp, arrogant bark. None of them. Fear is a powerful currency. Fear is brittle, Lyra said, casting her gaze downward in a pantomime of submission. But inside, she was screaming. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, expanding her mind outward. The dampening collar was still there, but the fractal key hidden in her sleeve hummed against her wrist, creating a microscopic fracture in the containment field. Through that crack, she poured her influence. She brushed against the mind of a mercenary captain standing near the buffet. He is underpaying you, she whispered into his subconscious. Look at the gold on his walls. He laughs at your poverty. She drifted to an imperial emissary, a nervous man sweating in his velvet coat. They know, she suggested, planting a seed of paranoia. Kyle records everything. He will use it to blackmail you. You are not a guest. You are a target. The room began to shift. Conversations grew sharper. Laughter became strained. A mercenary's hand drifted to his holster. An emissary spilled his wine, looking over his shoulder. Lyra opened her eyes, a small, cold smile touching her lips. The powder keg was primed. Now she just needed the spark. 5 levels down. Jace Kellen was currently suspended by his fingertips inside a ventilation shaft that smelled of burnt grease and rat droppings. "Move your ass, Kellen," Drax whispered from below him. "My arms are cramping." "I am moving," Jace hissed back, grunting as he pulled himself up to the next ledge. "But this vent is smaller than the last one. I think I just scraped off a nipple." "You have 2, Drax grumbled. "You will survive. We are approaching the primary data vault. Security density is increasing." Jace kicked open the grate and dropped into a service corridor, landing in a crouch. He scanned the hallway. It was lined with red emergency lights and patrolled by hovering sentry drones. 3 drones, Jace noted, pulling his data pad from his belt. "Standard patrol pattern. If we time it right, we can slide under the blast door before they cycle back." "I do not slide," Drax said, squeezing out of the vent and landing with a heavy thud that shook the floor plates. "I collide." "Then collide quietly," Jace said. "Ready? Go." They sprinted. Jace moved with the fluid grace of a pilot used to high-G maneuvers, while Drax charged like a runaway train. The blast door at the end of the hall was beginning to cycle closed for a security check. "It is closing," Jace yelled. "Dive!" He threw himself forward, sliding on the polished metal floor. He cleared the gap with inches to spare. Drax roared, threw his shoulder forward, and practically tackled the closing mechanism, jamming it for a split second with his cybernetic arm before rolling through. The door slammed shut behind them, sparks showering down. "Graceful," Jace panted, dusting himself off. "Effective," Drax corrected, checking his arm for damage. "We are in. The vault is 10 meters ahead, but Jace, the lock on that thing is military grade, Varric's personal encryption." Jace walked up to the massive circular door of the vault. He pulled the interface cable from his data pad and plugged it into the panel. "Patch," Jace said into his comms. "You are up. Work your magic." "Magic is just science you do not understand," Patch's voice replied in his ear, sounding strained. "I am attempting a brute force attack on the algorithm. But Jace, I am detecting a massive energy spike in the Grand Hall. It is Lyra. She is doing something big." "Just get the door open," Jace said, his hand resting on his blaster. "She handles the fireworks. We handle the theft." Back in the Grand Hall, the moment had arrived. Kyle stepped up to a raised dais at the front of the room. Behind him stood a massive monolithic structure of black stone, the central control node of the fortress. It was disguised as a ceremonial altar, but Lyra could feel the data streams pulsing through it like veins. "My friends," Kale bellowed, spreading his arms. The music died down. "You have seen my fleets. You have seen my wealth. But true power lies not in ships or credits. It lies in control." He beckoned to Lyra. "Highness, come. Show them what an obedient royal looks like." Lyra walked up the steps of the dais. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm, but her face was a mask of serenity. She reached the altar. "Place your hand on the interface," Kale commanded, his voice low. "Amplify the lighting system. Give them a show." Lyra placed her hand on the black stone, but she didn't amplify the lights. With her other hand, she slipped the fractal key from her sleeve and slammed it into the data port concealed on the side of the node. "I am not your show," Lyra whispered. The world dissolved. Lyra was no longer in the Grand Hall. She was standing in a landscape of shifting geometric shapes and waterfalls of binary code. The sky was a burning grid of neon white. She was inside the Nereza mainframe, and she wasn't alone. A towering figure materialized before her. It was faceless, composed of jagged shards of data and probability curves. The AI shard, the intelligence that ran the fortress and calculated the Empire's cruelty. Anomaly detected, the shard boomed, its voice vibrating through Lyra's very soul. Access denied. You are a variable that must be eliminated. I am not a variable, Lyra said, her mental avatar glowing with fierce violet light. I am the user, and I am initiating a system override. She lashed out with her mind, seizing control of the fortress's automated defenses, but the AI fought back. It didn't use firewalls. It used despair. The landscape shifted. Suddenly, Lyra wasn't in cyberspace. She was in a small, sun-drenched kitchen. The smell of brewing calf filled the air. Through the window, she saw a green field and a blue sky, a world far from the Empire, far from war. Jace walked in the back door. He looked older, happier. The scars on his face were faded. He smiled at her, a genuine, unburdened smile, and wrapped his arms around her waist. We are safe here, the dream Jace whispered, kissing her neck. Let them burn. Lyra, we did our part. We survived. Stay here. Stay with me. The temptation hit her like a physical blow. It was everything she wanted, a life where she didn't have to be a symbol, a life where Jace didn't have to be a soldier, a quiet, selfish peace. Calculating probability. The AI's voice overlaid the dream. If you continue this insurrection, there is a 94% chance Jace Kellen dies within the hour. If you submit, I can arrange your exile. You can have this life. You can abandon the galaxy to save him. Lyra looked at the dream Jace. She felt the warmth of his arms. It would be so easy to say yes, to run, to let the galaxy rot while she kept the one thing she loved safe. But then she remembered the look in the real Jace's eyes when he told her he was the only one who swore to bring her back. He hadn't come back for a coward. He hadn't come back for a woman who would let millions suffer to save herself. Lyra pulled away from the dream Jace. Tears streamed down her face. He would hate me, Lyra whispered, and I would hate myself. Logic dictates survival, the AI droned. Logic is a tool, Lyra said, her voice rising, the kitchen dissolving into ash. Not a master. True power isn't escaping responsibility, it is choosing to face it, even when you are terrified. I will not abandon them. Not my people, not him, and not myself. She slammed her hands together. The illusion shattered. Lyra stood in the digital void, blazing like a supernova. Override authorized. She poured her will into the fractal key. The AI shard screamed, a sound of digital tearing as Lyra rewrote its core command protocols. System control, transferred. Threat assessment, inverted. Targeting, hostiles. In the data vault, the console turned green. We are in, Jace yelled. The heavy door hissed open. Inside, rows of data stacks hummed. Jace didn't waste time. He ran to the central terminal and jammed in his drive. Downloading the Varric files, Jace said. Come on, come on. The screen flashed rapidly. Audio logs, bank transfers, the assassination order signed by the Imperial Council. It was all there. Download complete, Patch announced. Suddenly, the lights in the vault turned blood red. A siren began to wail, a deafening rhythmic shriek. Warning. System compromise. Lockdown initiated. She did it, Jace grinned, pulling the drive. That is our cue. We have company, Drax roared, leveling his heavy cannon at the door. A squad of Kale's elite guards stormed the hallway. Blaster fire erupted, filling the corridor with searing bolts of red plasma. Go! Drax yelled, firing back, his cannon chewing through the doorframe. I will hold them. Get that data to the ship. No way, Jace shouted, firing his pistol over Drax's shoulder. We leave together to the Grand Hall. We need Lyra. The Grand Hall was chaos. When Lyra opened her eyes on the dais, the room had transformed. The holographic displays were flashing red. The automated turrets in the ceiling, previously dormant, swiveled downward and pointed not at the guests, but at Kale's guards. "What have you done?" Kale roared, spinning to face her. "I changed the playlist," Lyra said, stepping back from the altar. "Kill her!" Kale screamed to his personal guard. But before they could move, the turrets opened fire. The room erupted into panic. Mercenaries flipped tables for cover. Imperial emissaries scrambled for the exits, only to find the doors sealed. Kale didn't run. He activated his gauntlet. A wave of purple gravitational energy rippled out from him, crushing the stone altar into dust. He looked at Lyra with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you can break me in my own house?" Kale growled. The armor on his back shifted, sprouting mechanical tendrils that anchored him to the floor. "I am the Shroud." He thrust his hand forward. A singularity formed in the air, a miniature black hole that sucked the light from the room. It flew at Lyra. Lyra didn't flinch. She threw up her hands, and a wall of telekinetic force met the singularity. The impact created a shock wave that shattered every glass in the room. "You are a landlord with a god complex," Lyra shouted, straining against the pull of the gravity well. Kale marched forward, each step cracking the floor. He manipulated the gravity around Lyra, flipping it. Suddenly, she was falling upward toward the vaulted ceiling. Lyra spun in the air, using her telekinesis to push off a chandelier, turning her fall into a dive. She landed behind a pillar as a bolt of condensed gravity obliterated the stone where she had just been standing. She was strong, but Kale was a warlord on his home ground, armed with tech that defied physics. He ripped a massive stone slab from the floor and hurled it at her. Lyra caught it with her mind, her nose bleeding from the effort, and deflected it into a group of guards. "Give up!" Kyle roared, closing the distance. "There is no escape." The blast doors to the hall blew inward with a deafening crack. Jace Kellen came flying through the smoke, sliding on his knees, dual-wielding blaster pistols. "Get away from her, you ugly son of a asteroid!" Jace screamed. He unleashed a barrage of fire at Kale. The bolts splashed harmlessly against Kale's gravity shield, but the distraction worked. Kale turned, snarling. "The pilot," Kale sneered. "The rat!" "Jace!" Lyra yelled, scrambling to her feet. "I told you to escape!" "I am bad at following orders," Jace shouted back, scrambling for cover as Kale fired a gravity pulse that pulverized a statue next to him. "It is a character flaw. Are you okay?" "I am a little busy," Lyra yelled, throwing a wave of force that knocked a squad of soldiers off their feet. Jace looked at her. She was bruised, bleeding, her dress torn, and glowing with a terrifying violet light. She looked magnificent. "Plan B?" Jace asked, reloading his pistols. "What is Plan B?" "Hit him until he stops moving." Jace broke from cover, sprinting laterally across the room to draw Kale's fire. Kale took the bait, unleashing a torrent of energy blasts. Jace dodged, wove, and rolled, his movements erratic and desperate. "Drax!" Jace yelled into his comms. "Now!" From the upper balcony, Drax appeared, holding a massive heavy repeater. He opened fire on Kale from above, peppering his shields. Kale was surrounded. He roared in frustration, slamming his gauntleted fists together. A shockwave of gravity exploded outward, knocking Jace, Drax, and Lyra to the ground. "Enough!" Kale bellowed. He rose into the air, levitated by his armor. He began to charge a massive sphere of energy between his hands, a gravity bomb that would level the entire hall. "I will bury you all." Lyra looked up. She saw Jace trying to stand, blood running down his face. She saw the madness in Kale's eyes. She knew she couldn't overpower him. not with brute force. But she controlled the node. She controlled the connection to the shroud's unstable network. She looked at Jace. "Trust me," she projected. Jace looked at her, and he understood. He didn't run. He nodded. Lyra stood up. She dropped her mental shields completely. She didn't push outward. She pulled inward. She reached out to the shroud itself, the chaotic, time-warping nebula outside the walls. "Kale!" Lyra screamed, her voice echoing with the power of 1,000 voices. "You wanted the shroud? Take it!" She channeled the raw energy of the anomaly through the fractal key and directed it straight at Kale. The air around the warlord didn't just ripple, it broke. A tear in the fabric of space-time opened directly on top of him. It wasn't a black hole. It was a loop. Kale looked up, his eyes widening in horror as he saw himself, 1,000 versions of himself, screaming in a kaleidoscope of fractured time. "No!" Kyle shrieked. "This is impossible." "It is justice," Lyra whispered. She clenched her fist. The temporal rift collapsed. Kyle Dorn vanished. He wasn't dead, not exactly. He was trapped in a pocket of distorted time, doomed to relive his defeat for eternity in the space of a second. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Lyra collapsed. The light faded from her skin, her knees buckled, and she fell forward. "Lyra!" Jace moved faster than he had ever moved in his life. He slid across the debris-strewn floor and caught her just before she hit the ground. She was limp in his arms, her skin pale, the bioluminescence dimming to a faint, dying flicker. Her breathing was shallow. Hey, stay with me," Jace begged, his voice cracking. He pulled her onto his lap, brushing the hair from her face. "Do not do this. You won. You beat him. You have to see this." Lyra's eyes fluttered open. They were dull, the violet fire exhausted. She smiled weakly. Did I look cool?" she whispered. Jace laughed, a sound that was half sob. "You look terrifying. It was the hottest thing I have ever seen." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. He held her tight, rocking slightly. "I am not losing you again. You hear me? I am not doing that part of the story again. Stay here." "I am tired, Jace," she murmured, her eyes closing. "I know," Jace said, lifting her into his arms. He stood up, his muscles screaming. "But you can sleep when we are in hyperspace." The fortress gave a menacing groan. Deep in the bowels of Neredza, the reactors, destabilized by the AI's deletion and the massive energy draw of the temporal rift, began to go critical. "Attention," the automated system announced, its voice strangely cheerful. "Structural integrity is at 0%. Catastrophic failure imminent. Have a nice day." "Time to go," Drax yelled from the balcony, tossing a grapple line down. "The whole rock is coming down." "Patch!" Jace yelled into his comms. "Bring the ship around to the main spire. We are jumping out the window." "That is a terrible plan," Patch screamed back. "I am on my way." Jace tightened his grip on Lyra. She buried her face in his neck. "Hold on," Jace whispered to her. He started running. The escape was a blur of falling masonry and exploding conduits. The grand hall was disintegrating. The floor fell away behind them into the abyss of the fortress's underbelly. Jace sprinted toward the massive stained glass window at the end of the hall. Drax was beside him, using his heavy cannon to blast falling debris out of the air. "Window!" Drax roared. "I see it!" Jace yelled. "Jace," Lyra murmured against his chest. "We are going to fall. We are going to fly," Jace corrected. "Trust me." He didn't slow down. He accelerated. He hit the window at full speed, shielding Lyra's body with his own. The glass shattered in a million glittering shards. They were in freefall. The wind roared in their ears. Below them, the city of Nereza was a chaotic tapestry of fire and panic. For a second, they were just falling. Then, a silver streak roared out of the smoke. The wayward star swooped underneath them, its cargo bay door gaping open like a mouth. "Catching you," Patch announced. Jace and Lyra slammed onto the cargo netting of the bay. Drax landed a second later, rolling heavily and hitting the bulkhead. "Close the door," Jace screamed, covering Lyra as the ship banked hard. The door hissed shut, sealing out the roar of the wind. Jace lay on the cargo netting, gasping for air, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. He looked down. Lyra was safe. She was breathing. Drax sat up, wiping dust from his cybernetic eye. "I hate your plans, Kellen. I hate them so much." "We are alive," Jace wheezed. "Barely." Patch chimed in over the intercom. "I detected a reactor breach behind us. Nereza is... well, it is currently becoming a very expensive firework." Jace pulled Lyra closer. She opened her eyes, looking at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the bone-deep exhaustion and the overwhelming reality of what they had done. "We did it," Lyra whispered. "Yeah," Jace said, brushing a kiss against her temple. "We did." He looked at the datapad clipped to his belt. The proof, the conspiracy, the end of the lies. "Patch," Jace said. "Get us out of the shroud. Set a course for the nearest Imperial broadcast beacon." Aye, Captain," Patch said, sounding unusually sincere. "Taking us home." As the ship blasted into the warp of the shroud, leaving the crumbling fortress behind. Jace Kellen held the Princess of the Empire in his arms, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like a man running away. He felt like a man who had finally found his way back. The wayward star was not flying so much as it was falling with style across the darker edges of the sector. The port engine had a rhythmic metallic cough that vibrated through the hull plates, and the smell of ozone and burnt wiring had settled into the air recyclers like a permanent guest. But they were moving. They were alive. Jace Kellen sat on the edge of the narrow bunk in his captain's quarters, a mug of lukewarm calf cradled in his hands. The room was dim, lit only by the amber standby lights of the instrument panels and the soft, washing glow of starlight passing through the reinforced viewport. Lyra lay on the bunk behind him, wrapped in a coarse gray wool blanket that looked ridiculous against the delicate, shimmering fabric of her ruined ceremonial gown. She was asleep, or so he thought, until her voice cut through the hum of the ship. "You are staring at the floor, Jace," she murmured, her voice raspy from smoke and screaming. "The floor is not going to explode. I checked." Jace turned, a small, tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I am just listening to the engine. Patch says the stabilizer is held together by structural foam and positive thinking." "Patch is dramatic," Lyra said, shifting to prop herself up against the bulkhead. The blanket slipped, revealing the bioluminescent markings on her collarbone. They were glowing softly now, a steady, warm violet that signaled safety. "Come here. You look like you are guarding a tomb." Jace set the mug down on the magnetic table and shifted closer, sitting with his back against the wall so their shoulders pressed together. The contact was electric, a grounding wire for two people who had spent the last 24 hours being electrocuted by fate. "I cannot believe we made it," Jace said quietly, looking at her hands. They were bruised, the knuckles scraped raw, but they were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. Lyra let out a short, breathy laugh. "You mean you cannot believe you finally managed to not abandon me?" Jace flinched. The joke was sharp, but he knew she used humor like armor. He looked at her, his hazel eyes darkening with the old guilt. "I deserved that." "No," Lyra said, her tone softening instantly. She reached out, her fingers threading through his, her palm warm against his calloused skin. You did not. Jace, look at me. He looked. Her eyes were vast, holding a depth of emotion that terrified him more than Kale's gravity bombs. I was angry, Lyra admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. For 3 years. I was furious. I sat in that cell, and I replayed the moment the shuttle doors closed. I hated the Empire. I hated Varric, but mostly, I hated myself. Why? Jace asked, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. Because I still wanted you to come, she said, the confession hanging in the air like smoke. Even when I thought you were a coward, even when I told myself you were just a pilot who followed orders, I would close my eyes and reach out for you. I hated myself for being weak enough to want the man who left me. You were not weak, Jace said fiercely. You survived the Shroud. You broke a warlord. You are the strongest person I have ever known. I only survived because I believed you were out there, Lyra said. She turned her body toward him, the blanket falling away slightly. I chose to live for more than revenge because I hoped, against all logic, that you were the man I thought you were, the man who would burn worlds to keep his promises. I did not want to burn them, Jace whispered, his voice thick. I just wanted to save you. I never felt worthy of it. Lyra, you are. You are the stars. I am just the dirt they shine on. Stop, she commanded gently. She pulled his hand to her chest, pressing it over her heart so he could feel the steady, rhythmic beat. I do not want perfection, Jace. I do not want a statue or a knight in white armor who never makes mistakes. I want the man who is scared to death and flies into a black hole anyway. I want the man who makes terrible jokes when he is terrified. I want you. The emotional nakedness of the moment was overwhelming. It stripped away the soldier and the princess, leaving just a man and a woman in a metal box hurtling through the dark. Jace leaned in, his resistance crumbling. I am yours, he breathed. I have been yours since the moment you walked into that hangar 3 years ago. He kissed her. It was not like the kiss in the fortress, desperate and fueled by adrenaline. This was soft. It was slow. It was a surrender. Jace's hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Lyra sighed into his mouth, her body relaxing against him, the tension of the last 3 years finally bleeding out. They sat there for a long time, sharing kisses that tasted of salt and relief, their foreheads resting together. The intimacy was profound, a crossing of internal boundaries that felt heavier and more significant than anything physical. They were trusting each other with the jagged edges of their souls. We have to go back, Lyra whispered against his lips, though she did not pull away. I know, Jace said, closing his eyes. But for 5 more minutes, let's just be 2 people who got away. 5 minutes, she agreed, tightening her grip on his hand. The broadcast station, known as Helix Relay, was a neutral platform located on an asteroid in the demilitarized zone. It was a haven for independent journalists, whistleblowers, and pirates with a manifesto. The wayward star docked with a clang that made Drax wince. The big mercenary was already at the airlock, his heavy cannon slung over his shoulder, looking surprisingly refreshed for a man who had fought an army. Patch, Jace said as they moved through the station's rusted corridors. Are we ready? Ready is a relative term, Patch's voice chirped from Jace's wrist comm. I have compiled the data. The encryption on Varric's files was good, but I am better. I also added a dramatic filter to the video of Kale screaming. It felt appropriate. They stormed the main control room. The technicians, a group of spindly aliens with 4 eyes, took one look at Drax and the glowing, battle-worn princess and immediately surrendered their consoles. Upload it, Lyra commanded, standing before the main transmitter array. Jace plugged the drive in, broadcasting on all frequencies. Imperial, civilian, military, even the encrypted channels the smugglers use. Everyone is going to see this. The screens on the wall flickered. The face of Admiral Varric appeared, his voice cold and incriminating as he discussed the disposal of the princess. Then, the logs of the bank transfers. Then, the footage of Kael Dorn's fortress, showing the colluding Imperial officers. And finally, Lyra. She stepped in front of the station's camera. She wore no ceremonial gown, just a flight suit she had borrowed from Jace, her hair tied back, her face scrubbed clean but still bearing the bruises of Nereza. She looked directly into the lens. "To citizens of the Empire," Lyra began, her voice steady and echoing with a power that required no telepathy. "For 3 years, you were told I died a hero. You were told I was a martyr for peace. That was a lie." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle across 1,000,000,000 screens. "I was not lost. I was sold. I was traded like currency by the very people sworn to protect you, because they feared what I would become. They feared a leader who would not bow to the cold calculations of a machine. They abandoned me to my fate." She looked at Jace, standing just off camera, and a softness entered her eyes before she turned back to the galaxy. "But I am back, and I am telling you now, the system that measures your lives in profit margins and acceptable losses ends today. I am coming home, not to rule as a symbol, but to answer to you." The feed cut. Jace exhaled, leaning against the console. "Well, you certainly know how to make an entrance." "It is done," Lyra said, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Now we see if they shoot us down or welcome us back." The reaction was instantaneous and volatile. The Empire did not just gasp, it screamed. Within hours, the data had propagated to every corner of civilized space. Riots broke out in the industrial sectors. The military was paralyzed by internal investigations as captains turned on their admirals. The narrative of the noble sacrifice had been shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of betrayal. The imperial court, backed into a corner and facing a civil war, had no choice. They issued a public summons. Princess Lyra was invited to return to the capital to clarify the events of her disappearance and address the High Council. "It is a trap," Jace said, pacing the cockpit of the Wayward Star as they sat in orbit above the capital planet. "Ethelgard. It has to be. They will arrest you the moment we touch down. Or worse, they cannot arrest me," Lyra said calmly from the co-pilot seat. "The eyes of the entire galaxy are on them. If they touch me, the Empire burns." "I do not like it," Jace muttered. "We should run. We could go to the rim, disappear, live on a beach somewhere where the only thing I have to worry about is sand in my boots." Lyra stood up and crossed the small space between them. She placed her hands on his shoulders, stopping his pacing. "Jace," she said, "look at me." He looked at her, his eyes full of fear, not for himself but for her. "I can walk away," Lyra said. "I can choose the beach. I can choose safety. And every night, I will look up at the stars and know that I let a machine dictate the suffering of trillions because I was too afraid to do my job." "I just got you back," Jace whispered. "I cannot watch you walk into a firing squad." "Then do not watch," Lyra said fiercely. "Walk with me, stand beside me, but do not ask me to be less than what I am. You said you swore to bring me back. Well, this is who I am. Jace, I am not the girl in the tower anymore. I am the queen who is going to break the wheel." Jace stared at her. He saw the fire in her violet eyes, the unshakable resolve. She was right. She had outgrown the role of the victim. She was a force of nature. He let out a long sigh, running a hand through his hair. Fine, but if anyone points a blaster at you, I am shooting them. Diplomatic immunity or not. Deal, Lyra smiled. And one more thing, Jace said, stepping closer. If we do this, if you take the throne, I am just a pilot, a deserter with a criminal record. I do not fit in a palace. Lyra, I will step aside. I will be your shadow guard, if that keeps you safe and keeps your reputation clean. Lyra's expression hardened. She grabbed the lapels of his flight jacket and yanked him down until their faces were inches apart. Do not you dare, she hissed, the anger mixing with a fierce affection. Do not you dare try to be noble and leave me again. I do not want a throne built on loneliness. Jace, I do not want to rule an empty room. I want a partner. I want the man who laughs at death and cheats at cards and holds me when I am shaking. You are not my shadow. You are my heart. If they want me, they get you too. Package deal. Jace looked at her, stunned. Then, a slow, genuine grin spread across his face. Package deal, he repeated. I hope the palace has a good bar. I am going to need it. The descent into Ethelgard was a spectacle. The wayward star, scarred and scorched from the shroud, descended through the clouds flanked by a reluctant honor guard of imperial fighters. They landed on the Grand Plaza, a sprawling expanse of white stone surrounded by towering spires and glowing sky bridges. The crowd was massive, millions of people, a sea of faces stretching to the horizon. They were silent, waiting. The ramp hissed open. Lyra didn't walk out alone. She reached back and took Jace's hand. They walked down the ramp together. The contrast was striking. Lyra in her simple flight suit, glowing with ethereal light, and Jace, battered and rugged, his hand firmly gripping hers. A roar went up from the crowd. It wasn't angry. It was jubilant. They saw the pilot. They saw the hand-holding. They saw the humanity of it. Jace squeezed her hand. Showtime, princess. Showtime, pilot, she replied. They marched straight to the council chamber. The doors, massive slabs of gold and durasteel, were pushed open. The chamber was a circular amphitheater dominated by the council, 12 high-ranking officials, and, at the center, the avatar of the AI directorate, a holographic column of shifting blue light. Admiral Varric was there, in chains, looking pale and defeated, but the AI was the real enemy. Princess Lyra, the AI's voice boomed, devoid of emotion. Your return is illogical. You introduce instability into the system. Instability is just another word for change, Lyra said, her voice ringing out in the acoustic perfection of the chamber. She stood in the center of the floor, Jace a step behind her, his hand resting on his holster. Your actions have caused chaos, the AI stated. Order must be maintained. The probability of empire collapse has increased by 40%. Your probabilities are flawed, Lyra countered, stepping toward the light. You calculate survival based on efficiency. You trade lives for numbers. You sold me to a warlord because I was a variable you could not predict. But that is your failure, not mine. Explain, the AI demanded. You cannot predict compassion, Lyra said. You cannot calculate the value of a promise kept. You looked at Jace Kellen and saw a deserter with a 0% chance of success. You looked at me and saw a broken asset. But here we are. She swept her hand toward the gallery, where the cameras were broadcasting to the galaxy. A system that cannot understand loyalty will always create its own destruction. Lyra argued, her telepathic mind pushing against the AI's logic matrix, highlighting the flaws in its cold code. Cruelty creates resistance. Betrayal creates enemies. Your order is just a slow suicide. The only survivable future is one where compassion is a non-negotiable variable, where we do not abandon the few to save the many, but fight for every single life. The holographic column flickered. The logic was sound. The AI was trapped in a paradox. Its methods for preserving the empire were actively destroying it by generating rebellion. Recalculating, the AI droned. Ethical parameters were non-updating. Previous model, obsolete. The light of the column shifted from a cold blue to a warmer golden hue. Proposal cooperative governance, the AI announced. The human factor must be integrated. Princess Lyra designated as prime overseer of ethical protocols. The chamber erupted in murmurs. It was a surrender. The machine had bowed to the moral argument. Lyra looked back at Jace. He winked at her. "I accept," Lyra said, turning back to the council. "But on my terms. Varric and his conspirators stand trial. The data vaults are open to the public, and we rule together. Council, AI, and Crown. No more secrets." The epilogue. It was a month later. The city of Ethelgard glowed below, a sprawling tapestry of light and life. The riots had settled into reforms. The trials were ongoing, but the air felt lighter, cleaner. Jace and Lyra stood on a private balcony of the royal spire, high above the noise. The wind whipped at Lyra's hair, now dressed in the silks of a regent, though she wore them with a looseness she hadn't possessed before. Jace wore a new jacket, though he had refused the formal court attire, claiming it made him itch. "So," Jace said, leaning his elbows on the railing, looking out at the moons. "Regent Lyra, overseer of ethics, breaker of warlords. It is a long title, going to be hard to fit on a business card." "I am thinking of shortening it," Lyra said, leaning into his side. "Maybe just Lyra." "I like Lyra," Jace said. "Lyra is good." He turned to look at her. The bioluminescence on her skin was calm, a steady rhythmic pulse that matched the beating of his own heart. "You know," Jace said softly, "I remember thinking, back on the station, that this was the stupidest thing I had ever done, chasing a ghost into the shroud." "And now?" Lyra asked, looking up at him. "Now?" Jace smiled, the expression reaching his eyes, erasing the last shadows of the war. "Now I think it was the only thing I have ever done that made sense." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing the patterns on her wrist. "They abandoned the princess to her fate," Jace murmured, reciting the words that had become his mantra in the dark. "But I was the only one who swore to bring her back." Lyra shook her head slightly, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. "You did not just bring me back to the Empire, Jace," she whispered. "You brought me back to myself." She reached up, her hands sliding into his hair, pulling him down. "Now," she said, her voice dropping to a husky command. "Stop talking and kiss your regent." "As you command, Highness." Jace grinned. He kissed her. It was a deep, unhurried kiss, executed under the light of 1,000,000,000 stars. It was a kiss that held the memory of fear and the taste of victory. It promised a future that would be messy and complicated and difficult, but they would face it together. Her markings glowed warmly, illuminating them in the darkness. They were two broken pieces that had fit together to make something unbreakable. They would build a more honest world, one argument, one joke, and one act of defiance at a time. And as the camera pulled back, leaving them to their moment of peace, the wayward star could be seen in the distance, docked at the royal spire, ready and waiting for the next adventure.